Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Mediatwits. This is episode 142. I'm Mark Glaser, executive editor of PBS MediaShift. Today we'll be talking about the International Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, which has taken over Las Vegas for the last few days. We'll talk about some big announcements there, including a new streaming service from Dish called Sling TV, where you can get ESPN without having a cable package or a satellite package. We'll also be talking about drones, more drones, the Internet of Things, and Intel's diversity initiative, and whether CES has lost its relevance over the years, and is it still worth attending. Before we get into it, I want to thank our sponsor, NextSpace and NextKids. Running your own business requires focus, so does parenting. Mediatwits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents could give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. And indeed, I am at NextSpace currently, and my son is next door in the childcare space, so it's a great setup. Before we start talking about CES, I want to introduce our panel. We have Connie Guglielmo from CNET joining us from Las Vegas. We have Jefferson Yen, our producer in LA. Megan Geuss, staff editor at Ars Technica. Will Oremus from Slate magazine. And Will and Megan, I guess, just coming back from Vegas this morning. So first, let's talk about CES in general. What's your feeling? You all just spent some time there. You're probably overwhelmed. This is what, 150,000 plus people and 2 million square feet of space. There's events going on there and outside. Does it feel like CES is still worth it? Is there still something to see for people covering tech and media? How important has it become? Connie, I'm curious about your thoughts first.
First of all, thanks for having me on your show. I would say it is and isn't relevant depending on your point of view and what you're looking for. For people in tech who cover this show, it's not really so much about what's happening on the show floor, it's what's happening off. There are tons of meetings, lots of special booths. There are companies who are not exhibiting on the show floor who are here. I passed by the Facebook center at one of the hotels, Google, Microsoft. All of these companies have a presence here because they've used this gathering because there are so many people coming as a meeting place. And so a lot of the interesting conversations are happening off of the show floor. If you're interested in seeing some of the latest gadgets, of course, there's drones, as you mentioned, tons of cars, tons of IoT-enabled devices, web-connected devices, some more interesting than others, some we've been seeing for years and years. Lots of appliances this year. I think there was the battle of the washing machines between LG, Samsung going on the show floor. But as I say, everyone comes, and so those meetings are very interesting.
And IoT, for people who don't know, the Internet of Things, which I guess we've heard about that for a while, like having your refrigerator connected to the Internet, etc. I mean, what's new about the Internet of Things that you noticed, Connie?
So I got to spend some time yesterday with Brian Krzanich, who is the CEO of Intel. The Internet of Things is a big push that all of these tech companies are making, partly because that's the trend. Everyone uses mobile devices. We're using the smartphone as the remote control for our life. Apps are controlling everything from our refrigerators to our front doors to security cameras. Intel has gotten into Internet of Things in a very big way because they make chips, the chips that power that connectivity and provide the processing power. Their booth was right next to Qualcomm. The big sign over the Qualcomm exhibits was Internet of Things. So we've been talking about Internet of Things for many years, as you said. The keynotes last year, both from Intel and Cisco, John Chambers actually got on the stage at CES last year and said that he expects the Internet of Things market to be $19 trillion worth of stuff in the next decade. Mobile connectivity, the fact that more and more people have mobile devices, smartphone devices, is driving that trend, so it's a matter of technology finally catching up to the hype. And of course, wearables, with Apple getting into the space in the next few months with the Apple Watch is also going to drive a big push into this idea that we're connected through various devices all the time and are connecting all sorts of things from thermostats to smoke detectors and beyond.
And Will, what were your thoughts about the show? Did you feel like it was, as Connie said, important to people just as far as meeting up rather than just the products?
No, I'm going to be contrarian here. This was
Always wanted.
This was my first trip to CES, so take this with a grain of salt. If I've been going there for 15 years, I might be so bored of it by now that I would want to shoot myself. But, I had avoided it in the past because I worked with Farhad Manjoo here at Slate, and he's been a noted critic of CES. He's called it the most worthless week in tech because it's full of pointless vaporware and announcements about incremental progress on TVs and refrigerators and that sort of thing. So I was expecting that. I went this year, and what I saw was actually different. It was a lot of very small companies with booths, companies that have been crowdfunded in many cases, startups that are trying to make new gadgets to harness some of the technology, some of the basic hard tech that's out there to do new things in different parts of our lives. So I saw a pair of hearing aids where you can direct which direction it's hearing by using your smartphone. There was a French company with a pair of motorized wheels that you can strap onto your feet. There were, Mercedes was there with a concept car of what they think a car is going to look like in 15 years when it's totally self-driving, and you can just sit back and have a little party with your friends as the car takes care of all the business. I thought it was really interesting to see all the directions the technology is going right now. The fact that a lot of the big companies are absent. Apple's not there this year. Microsoft has even pulled back from it. Google and Facebook wouldn't be caught dead with a booth at CES. I actually think that that opens up the space for other people to get some attention for their products for once. So I count me as in favor of CES, if only temporarily until I get tired of it too.
You still got the newbie shine on you.
Exactly.
So what about you, Megan? What was your thought in seeing everything and how worthwhile or not it was?
Yeah, I mean, I have been to CES before, and the thing about CES is, I think when you go there are a lot of small companies that have cool things, and I think that's part of the vaporware and the frustration as you keep going. That the stuff that you see never really gets pushed to market. That said, I think people sort of, from the outside, if you're not a tech journalist, because CES is so big, they expect it to be sort of a Comic-Con for people who like tech, but it's not that. It's still just a trade show. So I think if you're a tech journalist, it's a really easy way to meet the smartest people in tech. I met with the Federal Trade Commission chairwoman. I saw a talk from FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler. The panels upstairs above the convention center were amazing. They brought up really smart points. Going down onto the show floor, you can run past, and there's so much, you can run past a lot. But the few things that do stand out, they're very cool. You start to think about the future a little bit, but a lot of it I don't think will come to fruition.
Yeah, so there's definitely that kind of vaporware feel to it. What did you think about the kind of connected devices that you saw? Were there things that you saw that really, you felt like had a chance to break out and not be vaporware?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was there 3 years ago with PC World, I remember going past all these booths, Belkin especially, where we were advertising or trying to show off this coffee pot that you could set the time for the coffee pot to make your coffee with an app. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, my coffee pot already does that. I just have to get up from my bed and put the time in on my coffee maker. And this year, I think 3 years later, I guess you kind of see a little bit more depth. You have geofencing, so if your home senses that you're getting close to home, it can turn on a thermostat. Or, I saw a company that could take a photo every time it sees a face. So as you come in through your front door, it'll take a photo and it'll send it to your phone. So if you're at work and somebody comes to your front door, you can see who it is, maybe let them in. Stuff like that is really cool. I'm sure there are small companies and even big companies for their sector, we saw a company that makes, I guess, door key codes, and they had some interesting connected devices regarding that. And so, companies that you don't necessarily think of as big but end up being big in their sector really have a chance to break through CES. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the bigger stories, especially around media. Dish came out and said that they were going to have a Sling TV streaming service, which would include ESPN and CNN without getting a satellite package. And this is something we've seen now. HBO has announced that. We've talked a little bit about it. But the idea of actually having live TV channels playing on different devices, you have to pay, I guess, for each device is kind of the downside. But this idea of having kind of an unbundling of satellite service seems to be kind of a big step. Connie, how was that received at CES and by kind of the media people there?
Yeah, so I was at the Dish press conference when they announced it, and then spent a little bit of time at their booth, which was completely and utterly mobbed the entire time, or so far the past few days. At the conference, at the press conference, Dish CEO and the head of Sling TV talked about what they were trying to do. And basically what Dish is trying to do, obviously, is get more subscribers. They're number 3 in the U.S. as a pay TV service. They've got about 14 million. So they acknowledge that their biggest hole, as most pay TV services are millennials, people 18 to 35 who are not interested in paying huge fees to cable providers to get content. That's not the way they live their life and roll. And so they were trying to pick up this audience. That's what this is a play for. So some aspects of what they're doing are very interesting. $20 a month, no contract, cancel whenever you want, over the internet, that has appeal. I think people will test it out and see how it works. And I know there are issues about what it does and doesn't do, and there will be many tech stories describing the limitations of the service. But what it is a change, a sea change in how people are looking at the so-called cord cutters, people who don't want to be tethered to remote control and pay for fixed rate and have to be on a plan for a while. So I think when you look back at this CES, that will be one of the most important announcements. Even if it's not successful for Dish personally, even if they don't become the largest, pay TV or TV content provider in the world, it's a recognition that people are viewing their content differently. That the younger generation, which has grown up with these devices, looks at TV differently. Their parents might have remote controls. That's not the way they look at things. They time shift, they binge watch, they want to watch on demand. And so the fact that it is a low-cost package with no contract that you can turn on and off at will is an interesting experiment that I think a lot of other people will be paying attention to.
Yeah, Will, what do you think? I mean, do you think this is something that's going to catch on? I mean, are you going to run out and pay your $20 for this service? I might pay $20 for it. I don't know yet. I think I agree with Connie. I think that what is important here is not necessarily the specifics of this service by Dish. It's the fact that it took away one of the huge barriers to cutting the cord. I've never paid for cable TV in my life. I hope to never pay for cable TV. One of the biggest drawbacks, as anybody without cable knows, is that you can't watch live sports for the most part. Live news is also a big problem for cord cutting, and the cable industry has worked really hard to keep it that way. I mean, they are erecting all the barriers they can to keep people from feeling like they can realistically drop their cable subscription. This, to me, is a huge blow to that. It's not that Dish itself necessarily is going to attract huge numbers of subscribers with it. It's that one of the floodgates has been broken down now that you can get ESPN live without cable TV, and you start to look at a sort of a la carte menu of streaming options that now is coming closer and closer to replicating what you can get with cable TV. If you have, you have Netflix for $8 a month, say you've got Amazon Prime for $9 a month, you get this thing for $20 a month. If you have a TV, you can get a free, you can get digital antenna and watch over the air.
Maybe you can watch CBSN. They have a free streaming live news service now. HBO is coming out with its web-based streaming service later this year. For still less than the price of a cable TV subscription, you end up getting a lot of the important live TV, or at least a decent chunk of the important live TV, plus so much else. I mean, when you've got Amazon Prime, you've also got free shipping on Amazon. You've got access to old HBO shows like The Wire. You can watch HBO, which would cost you a lot more on top of a regular cable subscription. You can watch some shows on demand, although this Dish TV service unfortunately doesn't have DVR functions. But I think this is huge. I think that this is a big step toward a world in which people don't feel like cable TV is a basic utility. We pay for our smartphones, we pay for broadband, we pay for gas and electricity. I don't think we'll need to pay for cable TV in the future.
Megan, do you agree? I mean, is this the end of TV as we know it? I mean, we've been talking about this for years around, being cord cutters and what that means. But I wonder if, does it all add up right? I mean, $20 for this, $15 for that. I mean, it feels like we're getting back up to like $100 again for watching TV.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. The other issue with this is, you do get ESPN, but if you have a favorite sports team that has a regional agreement with a broadcaster or somebody like Comcast, then you still can't see that regional sports team unless you pay for pay TV. Do I think it will be successful for Dish specifically? I don't really know. Do I think that it does represent a big step? Yeah. Still, if you're paying $20 here and $50 here, I think for some people it might just make more sense to just pay for the pay TV. But it does represent a shift. So I mean, personally, I don't know that I would buy dishes. I also have never paid for pay TV, but I would definitely buy HBO's because I love HBO programming. I don't know that I would buy anything on Sling TV, but that's not me. A lot of people really do like the programming and there are 12 channels, I believe, and that's a lot. So.
Yeah. I mean, does anyone think that this might lead to down the road of someone like Comcast even saying, okay, Xfinity is going to be a streaming service too? I mean, that would seem like the biggest chip to fall. But I mean, do you think this is going to lead to more people jumping in, more cable and satellite companies following?
I absolutely think so. I don't think it probably will not be this year. It could be next year or 10 years down the line. But I definitely think that is a way that this is going.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more also about what Intel. I know Intel had a pretty wide-ranging press conference, and Connie, you mentioned all the kind of the chips they have everywhere. One of the other things they've been slammed for was kind of pulling ads around Gamergate from a gaming magazine, and so this became a big discussion last year and into this year. And Intel came out and said they were going to spend $300 million in trying to diversify their workforce and also just technology in general, with putting money into the kind of the pipeline of women and people of color working in technology. Connie, what was your take on how that was received I'm curious, at CES, which is kind of the center of all the tech people? I know how it's received outside. There was a lot of people complimenting them for it, but how was it received within tech?
Well, so I have a specific point of view as a woman in tech, because that was what was driving some of the Gamergate controversy that you talked about. Intel pulled an ad after a group that is critical of women in gaming, although they claim that they're not critical of women in gaming. We can debate what Gamergate is about as well. But again, I talked to Brian Krzanich, the Intel CEO, about this directly. On stage, he announced the program, as you said, by 2020. They want to have a more diversified workforce. They put $300 million. The most interesting part of what he said, as someone who has heard many tech companies talk about this over the past couple of years, it's kind of come to a head, if you will, in the last 2 years, with Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, writing a book called Lean In, talking about getting more diverse teams in place, and then the CEO of Microsoft back in October at a women's conference making some comments about how women shouldn't ask for raises, they should rely on good karma to get them the equal compensation that they need. all of those things came together for Intel. This is what Brian Krzanich told me. He has 2 teenage daughters, and both of them are very into math. And he wanted to at least to have some assurance that in the future, if they wanted to be the CEO of Intel, that they would at least have the opportunity to do so. The most interesting thing about what Intel did as part of that announcement, everyone's talking about diversity, and we need more diversity. All of these companies released diversity reports this year, as I'm sure you'll note. Apple, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, so on. But what he did, which a lot of companies have not done, is he tied it to managers' performance. So 2015 bonuses, the diversity of your teams and how you're moving your team on progress toward that metric will have a direct effect on compensation for managers, including Brian Krzanich, who is the CEO of Intel, said his own compensation. Now, he's very well compensated as the CEO of Intel, so a couple of $100,000 here or there, maybe not so much. But for managers on the front line, this is a big deal. And it was controversial within Intel. They knew it was the right thing. How to get there is always the question of debate. And by tying it to pay, which, again, I don't know of any other company that's tying it to performance and 2015 bonuses, that was quite significant. That was more meaningful than just saying we need to do better.
Yeah, it's actually taking a step and doing something about it instead of just talking about it and saying, hey, let's try harder. Will, what was your take on what Intel did, and do you think there's going to be other companies following?
I think Intel's effort sounds genuine. I mean, I like that they're putting their money where their mouth is to some extent. How much effect their programs will have, I don't know. I guess what stood out to me, again, this was my first CES, and I expected it to be a lot of men, and it was. It's a lot of men. I was also really taken aback by the fact that we still have tech companies that think it's a good idea to set up their booth and put out some skimpily dressed women in front of it to try to lure people in. Nobody's really talking about this year because, from what I understand, it was probably way worse in the past. I guess most people feel like, oh, it's a big improvement. The women are wearing, the booth babes are wearing more clothes this year. I mean, great. But as someone coming there for the first time, it was still jarring. I mean, the message to women is, you are not the producer of technology. You're not even the consumer of technology. You're an object that we're going to put out there to lure in the real consumers who are men, and we're going to validate their desire to ogle you, and we're going to use that to build our business and our brand. The fact that companies, I don't know, there's been debate about whether booth babes should be banned. They shouldn't have to be banned. Companies should not feel that this is a good strategy. I mean, this is not, it does not say good things about your company when you have women, up there wearing like spangly bikini tops, trying to advertise your product.
And Megan, what's your thought on that, on what was going on and what it looked like at CES this year versus past years?
Well, with respect to what Intel has done and promised, I think that is a good step forward. I think Connie was there, and so she actually, knows. She heard the genuineness in their voice. I would like to see it first. I think putting money out there and tying it to managers' pay is a great step. Putting money into education programs can sometimes be perfunctory. I think that if you really want to change diversity in tech, you have to change a lot of the culture in tech companies. And I mean, coming from my perspective, I am a white middle-class female. I am one step from the most privileged type of person in the entire world. And I have felt excluded from tech in certain aspects in my life. It wasn't because I didn't have access to computer science classes. I went to a great college. I did have access to computer science classes, but when you get into those computer science classes, you can really feel like an outsider. And I think what Intel should be thinking about is how to change a culture rather than just throw money at education and say, oh, here's $300 million to teach you how to code. Now go at it, But tying it to managers' pay is a great way to change a culture.
At least within Intel, but how do you kind of change the overall culture in society? I mean, that's a really difficult thing to do.
Oh yeah, I mean, let me be that's what I'm saying. You know, to change the culture within Intel is a good step forward in changing the culture in tech largely. As far as booth babes, you know, personally, I'm not outraged about it. It's a marketing stunt. People objectify other people all the time for marketing, and as long as they're getting paid really well, and you know, then yeah, it's their deal. So
right, and there's a story that Jefferson's bringing up here by Brian Moylan saying you don't need to ban booth babes, just bring on the booth boys.
Yeah, totally.
So I just want to add to this debate, because it's something obviously I've been following for a very long time. 2 years ago I was at Forbes and I wrote, it was my first CES then, and I was confronted with booth babes. I covered Apple, so I was always at Macworld Expo, which is the big Apple show, also in January, so I was spared coming to Las Vegas during that week. But I wrote a piece after CES, after seeing the booth babes, and I was actually shocked. Not that there were booth babes, but how many. The first year I attended, one of the booth babes was the only thing that she was wearing was paint, not even clothes. And so I asked the CEA, the organization, what is their policy? They didn't have one. They didn't have a dress code, and they told me at that time that they'd never gotten an official complaint about booth babe. So I wrote a piece saying, time to change that. Let's put in official complaints. How about a dress code? Whatever you wear at your company back home should be what the people at your booth wear. So if you're a company that is all jeans and flip-flops or shorts, great, they can wear that. If you wear suits because you're a button-down, you know, uptight conservative company, fine. Your booth personnel should match the culture of your company. And that was actually, I got a lot of pushback for writing that, saying that I just wanted ugly people to man the booth. It is better in that there are fewer babes, and there's more clothing on them this year, so I guess that is a sign of progress. But it goes back to the overall debate that you were talking about, women in tech. You know, for some reason, the debate about women in tech always goes back to the idea that there are fewer women studying STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. But if you look at the tech industry, there are tons of women in tech. You have 2 women in tech on your show right now, and I can tell you I do not have a STEM degree. I have a master's in journalism and an undergrad degree in political science, but I've been a tech reporter for 20 years, and I would, you know, challenge anybody to say that I'm not member of the tech industry. And if you look around the tech industry, there are tons of women in tech. Sheryl Sandberg is the COO of Facebook. She has an MBA. She doesn't have a tech degree. Safra Catz is the co-president of Oracle, one of the largest database companies in the world. She's a financial person. So it's not that there are not women in tech. It's for some reason you have to have a STEM degree to have credentials suddenly in tech, that's a new phenomenon. When Twitter announced that they were going public last year, again, I was at Forbes and I did a story where I just looked at the top 12 leaders of Twitter, 6 of the top management people, the 6 board of directors, only one woman. It was their general counsel who has a law degree, and there was a lot of stories about why no more diversity on the Twitter board and the top management team, and this issue of, oh, they don't have STEM degrees. And so I said, great, what does it take to be on the Twitter board? What fabulous credentials do you have to have? And out of those 12, only 2 had technical degrees. The VP of engineering, who I give you, should have an engineering degree, and Dick Costello, their CEO, but the other degrees were French literature, philosophy, journalism, English journalism. The head of sales at Twitter has a degree in English journalism as opposed to some other kind of journalism from a university in Florida. So when you actually go and look at things, you can say whatever you want, but go and look at the data of who are these people on these boards. What are their degrees? How many of the members of the boards of these various companies have STEM degrees? And it starts to diffuse the debate that way. You're seeing that there's a lot more talk and that the reality is quite different. So then it does come back to bias and people just wanting to hire people who are like them and having to change that, which is what Intel's CEO told me that they are trying to do. That is the biggest issue that they have. You're hiring more of the same because you're comfortable hiring people like you, and your social network is people like you, and that's where things have to change.
Right, and there's also the VCs who are kind of funding people who are like them too. I mean, that's another issue. in Silicon Valley too, and in media and tech. It's been a big issue, and we've tried to do what we can with MediaShift. We've had some women's hackathons to try to at least, give and empower students where we can, but it's definitely a bigger issue that I think we'll all have to look at, and hopefully things will change over time if we keep, giving it the attention that it deserves. So I want to thank you all for joining us for our show today. I want to thank our panel, Connie Guglielmo from CNET, Jefferson Yen, our producer, Megan Geuss from Ars Technica, Will Oremus from Slate. I want to thank our sponsor, NextSpace and NextKids. You can learn more about their program at nextspace.us/nextkids. You can catch us each and every Friday, the Mediatwits at MediaShift at pbs.org/MediaShift. Thanks, everyone, and have a great week.